Can a 13-year-old boy save an empire that has survived betrayal, civil wars, and mad emperors? Or is he about to witness the beginning of Rome's greatest collapse? The streets of Rome had barely been washed clean after the violent death of Elagabalus. His statues were already being torn down, his name erased from official records, and the people spoke of him only in whispers. The Roman Empire had escaped one of its darkest chapters, but nobody knew whether peace had truly returned. Beyond the city walls, powerful enemies watched every Roman weakness. Inside the capital, the Senate feared another bloody struggle for the throne. The empire needed more than just a new emperor, it needed a leader capable of restoring Rome's fading strength. On March 13, 222 AD, that responsibility fell upon a quiet 13-year-old boy named Alexander Severus. Unlike the rulers before him, Alexander had never dreamed of becoming emperor through violence. He had been carefully educated in philosophy, Roman law, military history, and government. His mother, Julia Mamaea, believed that knowledge and discipline created a stronger ruler than fear and cruelty. While other young nobles spent their days enjoying luxury, Alexander studied the lives of Augustus, Trajan, Hadrian, and Marcus Aurelius, hoping to learn why their reigns had brought stability to Rome. When the Senate officially proclaimed Alexander emperor, many Romans breathed a sigh of relief. For the first time in years, they saw a ruler who appeared humble rather than arrogant. He entered public ceremonies without excessive luxury, treated senators with unusual respect, and listened carefully before making decisions. After the chaos of Caracalla and Elagabalus, his calm personality felt like the beginning of a new era. But Alexander was still only 13. The real power behind the throne belonged to his mother, Julia Mamaea, highly intelligent and politically experienced. Julia Mamaea surrounded her son with Rome's finest legal scholars, military advisors, and administrators. Instead of allowing corrupt officials to dominate the government, she selected experienced men known for honesty and competence. One of the most respected among them was the famous jurist Ulpian, whose understanding of Roman law made him one of the greatest legal minds in history. Under his guidance, the imperial administration became more organized, fair, and efficient. Alexander also worked to repair the relationship between the emperor and the Senate. During previous reigns, senators had lived in constant fear of execution. Alexander ended many of those practices, restored confiscated properties, and encouraged experienced senators to participate once again in governing the empire. Confidence slowly returned to Rome's political system. The economy also began to recover. Government spending became more disciplined, unnecessary extravagance was reduced, and public finances improved. Trade routes stretching from Britain to court cases became fairer. Corrupt officials faced punishment regardless of their influence. Construction projects resumed across several provinces. Roads were repaired, and public buildings received long overdue maintenance. For many citizens, Alexander Severus represented something Rome had almost forgotten: a government that worked for the empire rather than for the personal ambitions of one ruler. Yet while Rome enjoyed this brief period of recovery, a far greater danger was rising. Beyond its eastern frontier in Persia, a new dynasty known as the Sassanian Empire had overthrown the old Parthian rulers. Their ambitious king, Artaxerxes, believed the ancient Persian Empire should be restored to its former glory. Unlike the Parthians, who often fought defensive wars against Rome, the Sassanians dreamed of conquest. They began strengthening their armies, capturing border fortresses, and openly challenging Roman authority in the east. Roman merchants arriving from Mesopotamia brought disturbing reports. Persian armies were growing larger every year. New fortifications appeared along the frontier. Diplomats warned that war was becoming inevitable. Alexander Severus had inherited an empire that seemed peaceful on the surface. But the greatest military challenge Rome had faced in generations was already approaching. The young emperor would soon discover that governing Rome from the safety of the imperial palace was far easier than defending it on the battlefield. For nearly a decade, Alexander Severus governed the Roman Empire with patience instead of fear. Corruption declined, The Senate regained influence, and many citizens believed Rome had finally escaped the endless cycle of civil wars that had haunted the empire since the death of Marcus Aurelius. Yet while peace returned to Rome itself, a far more dangerous storm was gathering beyond the eastern frontier. In Persia, a powerful new ruler named Ardashir had completely transformed the balance of power in the east. He had overthrown the old Parthian Empire and founded the aggressive Sassanian Empire, declaring himself the rightful heir of the ancient Persian kings. Unlike the Parthians, who often preferred diplomacy and limited wars, Ardashir dreamed of rebuilding the mighty empire that had once challenged Alexander the Great. To him, Rome was no longer an equal neighbor, it was an obstacle standing in the way of Persian greatness. Roman border commanders soon began sending alarming reports to the capital. Persian cavalry had crossed into disputed territories. Fortresses along the Euphrates were under increasing pressure. Wealthy trading cities feared invasion, while caravans traveling between east and west reported growing military activity. Diplomats attempted negotiations, but Ardashir ignored Roman warnings. His armies continued expanding toward Roman-controlled Mesopotamia. Alexander Severus realized that words alone would no longer protect the empire. For the first time in his reign, the young emperor prepared for a full-scale military campaign. Although he had spent most of his rule improving administration rather than commanding armies, he understood that an emperor who refused to defend Rome would quickly lose the respect of both soldiers and citizens. Accompanied by his mother Julia Mamaea, he left Rome and marched east with one of the largest Roman armies assembled in years. The journey itself demonstrated the enormous size of the empire. Thousands of legionaries, cavalry units, engineers, doctors, supply wagons, and government officials crossed Asia Minor before reaching Syria. Along the route, Alexander personally inspected forts, encouraged soldiers, and organized supplies. He hoped that a display of overwhelming Roman strength would force Ardashir into negotiations before major fighting began. But the Persian king had no intention of retreating. Instead, he gathered a massive army unlike anything many Roman soldiers had ever faced. Elite Persian cavalry wearing heavy armor, skilled mounted archers, and disciplined infantry assembled near the frontier. The Sassanians combined speed, powerful cavalry charges, and relentless archery to create a dangerous new style of warfare. Roman commanders quickly realized that this enemy was very different from the Parthians they had fought for generations. Alexander attempted one final diplomatic solution. Envoys were sent to Ardashir offering peace if Persia respected Rome's eastern borders. The Persian king rejected every proposal. According to Roman accounts, he demanded that Rome surrender territories once ruled by the ancient Persian Empire, demand no Roman emperor could ever accept. War became inevitable. Alexander divided his army into several columns, hoping to attack Persia from different directions at the same time. One force advanced through northern Mesopotamia, another prepared to strike farther south, while the emperor remained with the central army. The strategy was ambitious. If successful, it would force the Persians to divide their own forces and weaken their defenses. The campaign, however, proved far more difficult than expected. The harsh climate exhausted Roman soldiers unaccustomed to the burning deserts and rugged mountains. Supply lines stretched across enormous distances, making food and equipment increasingly difficult to deliver. Persian cavalry repeatedly attacked isolated Roman units before disappearing into the landscape. Communication between the Roman armies became unreliable, and the carefully planned coordination slowly broke down. Several fierce battles followed. Roman legions demonstrated their famous discipline, forming defensive lines that withstood repeated Persian attacks. Engineers constructed temporary fortifications overnight, while archers and cavalry attempted to counter the highly mobile Persian horsemen. Although the Romans won some engagements, they failed to achieve the decisive victory Alexander had hoped for. Both empires suffered heavy losses. Neither Rome nor Persia could completely defeat the other. Eventually, both sides withdrew from the frontier, each claiming success. Roman historians portrayed Alexander as the defender of the eastern provinces, while Persian records celebrated Ardashir's resistance against Rome. Modern historians generally believe the campaign ended without a clear winner. Alexander had prevented a major Persian breakthrough, but he had also failed to destroy the growing Sassanian threat. When the emperor returned west, celebrations were organized in Rome, and he received honors for defending the empire. Yet behind the public ceremonies, serious problems remained. Many officers believed Alexander had been too cautious. Some soldiers complained that his mother, Julia Mamaea, exercised too much influence over military decisions. Others quietly compared him with warrior emperors like Septimius Severus and Caracalla, arguing that Rome needed a stronger commander. As new enemies gathered along every frontier, Alexander had preserved the empire in the east, but before he could rebuild his exhausted army, a new crisis exploded in the north. Across the river Rhine, fierce Germanic tribes were preparing to invade Roman territory, and this time, the greatest threat would not come from Persia. It would come from the emperor's own soldiers. The eastern campaign against the Sassanian Empire had ended without disaster, but it had not delivered the glorious victory the Roman people expected. Although Alexander Severus had successfully defended Rome's eastern frontier, many soldiers returned disappointed. They had hoped for another emperor like Trajan or Septimius Severus, a leader who would conquer enemy lands and return home in triumph. Instead, they believed Alexander had been too cautious. Inside the military camps, quiet criticism slowly grew louder. The emperor could not hear every conversation, but his officers certainly could. For the first time since taking the throne, Alexander Severus was beginning to lose the confidence of the very men responsible for protecting his empire. Before the eastern provinces had fully recovered, alarming reports arrived from the Rhine frontier. Powerful Germanic tribes, including the Alemanni, had begun crossing Roman borders, raiding villages, destroying farms, and threatening important frontier towns. Smoke rose from settlements that had stood peacefully for generations. Refugees fled south, carrying terrifying stories of surprise attacks and entire communities being forced to abandon their homes. Rome now faced another major war, this time in the forests of northern Europe. Alexander immediately gathered his army and marched toward Germania. Thousands of legionaries crossed Gaul, constructing temporary camps each night as they advanced toward the Rhine. The emperor knew that this campaign would determine not only the empire's safety but also his own reputation. If he defeated the Germanic tribes decisively, he could silence every critic inside the army. But if he failed, his throne itself might be in danger. When Alexander reached the frontier, Roman scouts confirmed that the enemy had assembled a large coalition of warriors. Unlike the disciplined Roman legions, these tribal forces relied upon speed, surprise, and fierce close combat. They knew every forest, river, and mountain far better than the Romans. Many commanders urged Alexander to launch an immediate attack. Before the tribes grew even stronger, instead, the emperor chose another path. Remembering the terrible cost of previous wars, Alexander believed that peace was worth pursuing whenever possible. Rather than ordering a massive assault, he sent envoys to negotiate with the tribal leaders. Gifts of gold, supplies, and trade agreements were offered in exchange for peace along the frontier. From Alexander's perspective, avoiding unnecessary bloodshed would protect both Roman lives and the empire's finances. But many soldiers saw something entirely different. Inside the camps, whispers spread rapidly. The emperor is trying to buy peace. He is afraid to fight. He listens more to his mother than to his generals. These rumors spread from one legion to another. Veterans who had served under Septimius Severus openly compared the young emperor to his father, insisting that the old emperor would have attacked without hesitation. Alexander's greatest strength, his desire to avoid unnecessary war, was now being interpreted as weakness. His mother, Julia Mamaea, made the situation even more difficult. Deeply concerned for her son's safety, she encouraged careful negotiations rather than reckless battles. Although her advice was understandable, Many officers resented her influence over military affairs. To hardened Roman soldiers, the idea that imperial decisions were being shaped by the emperor's mother damaged Alexander's image as commander-in-chief. Among the dissatisfied officers stood a towering soldier named Maximinus, later known as Maximinus Thrax. Born in the frontier regions, he possessed enormous physical strength and had earned the respect of ordinary legionaries through years of military service. Unlike Alexander, Maximinus lived among the soldiers, trained beside them, and shared their hardships. The army increasingly viewed him as the kind of leader Rome needed during dangerous times. In the early months of 235 AD, the crisis finally exploded. As Alexander continued attempting negotiations with the Germanic tribes near Moguntiacum, modern Mainz, Germany, groups of soldiers openly declared their support for Maximinus. The rebellion spread with astonishing speed. Entire military units abandoned their loyalty to the emperor and proclaimed Maximinus as the new ruler of Rome. Once the legions made their choice, events moved faster than anyone inside the imperial headquarters could control. Alexander realized the danger too late. He attempted to restore discipline and appeal to the loyalty of his troops, reminding them of his years of peaceful government and the stability he had brought to the empire. But his words no longer carried the authority they once had. Many soldiers had already decided that Rome required a warrior emperor rather than a cautious statesman. Soon afterward, rebellious soldiers stormed the imperial camp. Alexander Severus and his mother, Julia Mamaea, remained together inside their headquarters as the mutinous troops approached. According to ancient historians, the emperor refused to flee. He understood that escaping was impossible. Within moments, the soldiers entered the camp and murdered both Alexander and his mother. The young emperor was only 26 years old. His 13-year reign came to a sudden and violent end, not at the hands of a foreign enemy, but by his own army. With Alexander's death, the Severan Dynasty, founded by Septimius Severus more than 40 years earlier, finally came to an end. But something even more important had changed. For the first time, the Roman army had openly chosen and murdered an emperor simply because it preferred another commander. That single event marked the beginning of one of the darkest periods in Roman history, the crisis of the 3rd century. Over the next 50 years, Rome would suffer constant civil wars, foreign invasions, economic collapse, plague, and dozens of rival emperors fighting for the throne. The empire that had once ruled the known world now stood on the edge of destruction. And the next man to wear the imperial purple would not be a philosopher, a priest, or a prince. He would be a giant soldier from the frontier. His name was Maximinus Thrax.